We're smack dab right in the middle of a sermon series that we're doing, and the sermon series is simply this: slave, servant, son. Last couple weeks, we started looking at slave, and this week we're going to be looking at servant. We're going to be seeing how that applies to us. And you know, this idea of serving others, it's sort of a difficult concept for us a lot of the times. And I think really at the heart of serving, though, comes probably one of the hardest things that any of us could do, and that's forgiveness. See, in order to serve someone, we really have to walk with a forgiving heart and live a life of forgiveness. In fact, that's a real common sermon because so many people struggle with it. There was one Sunday was a preacher, he was sharing on that. In fact, it was called Forgiving Your Enemies. That was his message. And he was just like giving it out and sort of preaching God's word and letting it out. And it came to the end. And at the end, he said, I want the people that are willing to walk in forgiveness to lift up their hands right now. Half of the congregation, 50%, lifted their hands. He wasn't satisfied with that, and so he started preaching some more. So he preached for 20 more minutes and asked the same question: how many now are willing to walk in forgiveness? 75% of the congregation said they would. He still wasn't happy with that. He preached for another 15 minutes. Now, at this moment, the people just want to go eat lunch, right? So they're willing just to say whatever to get out of there. So he asked the same question. They knew it was coming. Every single hand went up except one lady who was sitting right near the front, an elderly woman that was sitting there. Now, he knew her, and he looked at her and was like, Mrs. Jones, are you not willing to forgive your enemies? And this elderly lady looked up and simply said, I don't have any, right? Mrs. Jones, the pastor went, that is very unusual. How old are you? And she said, 93. 93, Mrs. Jones. You got to come down here up in front and you got to tell the congregation, how can a person live to be 93 years old and not have an enemy in the world? The little sweetheart of a lady, she tottered down the aisle, came right to the front, turned toward the congregation and simply said this: it's easy. I just outlived those idiots. And then she went back to her seat. That's one way to forgive. You can just outlive those idiots. But man, there's many, many better options that are out there. You know, as we talk today about service and servants and what that looks like, we have a sermon that we've been working on memorizing for the last couple weeks. And so what I did this week, it's the book of Romans chapter 6, verse 18. I took some more words away from it. And let me tell you, if you can do this good, you will do a lot better than the first two services. All right, so Romans 6:18, I guess, isn't as easy as Philippians 4:13 was, so let's see how we can do today. Now, I conveniently took a couple more words out than last week, so I'm going to say the words you see, and I want you guys to say the words that are missing, all right? You guys ready? Got this? All right, here we go. Romans 6:18 says this: you have been... All right, we're good then. All right, it's all across the board, right? I'm going to help you. It starts with the word set. All right, you have been... it would be cool if everyone was just like, set! And that was it. You know, you're like, yeah, you're so close. Set free from sin. All right, set free from sin. Remember we did that? All right, let's try it again. You have been... set free from sin. You guys are awesome. You're the best service of the day, man. That was good. All right, now see if we can get the next one. And have become... slaves to righteousness. Exactly right. You have been set free from sin and become slaves to righteousness. Now, I'm just going to warn you, next week I'm going to take a couple more words away. So let's work on that. Write that down this week. Be thinking about Romans 6:18. And what we've looked at the past 2 weeks is we looked at the reality that God sets us free from sin through his son Jesus. He died on a cross. His blood covers over our sin, and we can walk completely free from sin in our lives today. But what we notice is that we are set free, but we also become slaves again. Slaves to what we looked at the last 2 weeks: righteousness, a slave to God, and a slave to others. Now, if you weren't here for this message series, get online, theplaceaz.com, and you can watch the videos from the last 2 weeks. We'd encourage you to do that. Now, the last 2 weeks, we really defined slave in the Bible in the Greek is this word doulos, doulos. And what that word meant, it literally meant a slave, a bondman, a man who was like a servant. Metaphorically, it was one who gives himself up to another's will, or those whose service is used by Christ in extending and advancing his cause among men, devoted to another to the disregard of one's own self-interest. Literally, it meant a servant. Literally, it meant an attendant. Now, that's interesting because we get this idea, and this thing is consistently interpreted as slave. Now, it's a different Greek word for our word servant. And the Greek word for servant is this word, diakonos, and it's one who executes the commands of another, especially of a master, a servant, an attendant, a minister, the servant of a king, a deacon, one who is assigned by the church who cares for the poor and has charge of and distributes the money collected for their use. Sort of the example would be a waiter or one who serves food and drink. So at the core of this definition, there really is a difference between this word slave and this word servant. Slave really comes down to who I belong to. I was once a slave to sin, now I'm a slave to Christ. Who do we belong to in our life? But when we see servant, it's what I do now that I belong to someone or something. Does that make sense? It comes back to what I do now that I do that. So I've been set free from sin. I become a slave of Christ. Now how do I live my life? I become a servant. It becomes what I do. A slave has to do with identity, right? At the core, who I am, while servant has to do with action, what I do because of who I am. See? So slave is my identity, right? And what I do because of that identity is I become a servant. Now, grab your Bible, and we're going to open up to the book of Mark, chapter 9. If you don't have a Bible, grab one from underneath the chair in front of you. There should be one there. Mark chapter 9. Now, as you guys are flipping to Mark chapter 9, as I was really preparing to think about communicating with you this week and really trying to understand a good way to let you know some good principles, I began to think about my golf game. Any golfers out there? Yes? No? Okay, good. Oh, I got one in the back. Got a golfer. All right. Well, has anyone ever seen a golf club before? All right, good. So we're all on the same page there because that's what this thing is right here, a golf club. Now, I'm from Ohio, and I now live in Arizona. Arizona is like the golf capital of the world, right? Or at least the country. It feels that way. Everybody comes here to golf. Anyone that visits, like, let's go golfing. I've been golfing. I've never been golfing on a course since I've lived here for 8 years. I've been to the driving range one time, right? When I was in Ohio, I used to golf all the time. I get the fluorescent balls and I golf in the snow. I did it all the time, right? But since I've been here, I haven't. But I began to think back on my time golfing, and I really, really enjoyed golf. The problem was I could hit the ball really, really far. The problem was that I could not hit the ball really, really straight. And in golf, that's a problem. The short grass is in the middle, the long grass is on the sides. So every time I would go back and I would swing that club, it would just shoot out. It would go really, 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 really far. But the problem is it would turn. Now, if you're not familiar with golf, if you hit the ball and it goes out and it goes to the right, that's known as a slice. And if you hit the ball and it goes out to the left, if you're right-handed, that's known as a hook. Now, the good thing about me, I was proficient at both. All right? I could do that all the time. So I never, ever stayed in the fairway. So I was around some people. They understood golf, and they took me under their wing, and they wanted to teach me about golf. So they took me out to the driving range, which is like this place you practice golf. And he was like, all right, go ahead and swing. And I remember I did it, and it shot off, and it went right off over to the side. He's like, okay. He's like, you got to pay attention to your feet. And he started talking to me about my feet, the way my feet were. And then he was like, how are you holding the club? All right, let me see how you're holding the club. And I show him how I was holding the club. He's like, all right. And then he'd walk me through all these different steps. He's like, your eyes, where are your eyes? Your eyes have to be in a certain spot. Your shoulders, how is your body turning? And I go through this entire thing, and he's teaching me, and he's showing me all these things. And wouldn't you know, by nearing the end of our lesson, I hit that thing, and it went straight, and it stayed in the short grass. It was awesome. Man, I hit that thing, and it landed right there, and I was so excited. I'm like, yes, I'm getting this. And then the guy left. And then I teed up my ball, I hit it, and it went off to the side. I went right back to my hook. Now, how is that? When I had someone sort of looking over me and helping me, I was able to hit it straight as an arrow, as I was aware of these issues that I had in my life, these different changes and tweaks I had to make. But the minute that he left, It's like I forgot all that and I went back to my old ways. You see, in our life, we have ingrained habits, things that we do on a regular basis. And it's difficult sometimes to change that pattern in our life. Now, the good news is that it is possible to change these patterns that we have in our life, but it takes time and consistency. See, that's the beautiful thing about the Bible. When we consistently have the Bible as part of our life, it allows us to adjust our hands, adjust our feet, adjust where our eyes are. It's reminding us of the right way so that we can hit that ball straight every time. That's why the Bible is so important in our life. It keeps us hitting straight. When we find ourselves drifting away from it, we go back to our old habits, and next thing you know, we're spending all of our time in the rough. We have to pay attention. That's why God's Word is so important to us. Now that you're in Mark chapter 9, I want you to look at verse 33. Mark chapter 9, verse 33. Now, in Mark 9:33, it's going to read like this. It says, they came to Capernaum. Now, who's the they? They is the disciples. All right, the disciples are traveling around. They come to the city. The city is named Capernaum. It continues to say, when he was in the house, who's the he? That's Jesus. Okay? So all the disciples and Jesus are traveling around. They come to the city Capernaum. And then it says, when he was in the house, Jesus, he asked them a question. Now, the question was this: what were you arguing about on the road? But they, the disciples, kept quiet because on the way they had argued about who was the greatest. Who was the greatest? Now, as they traveled on the road, Jesus heard or knew that there was an argument going on, chooses not to say anything about it then, gets to Capernaum, comes to the house, and then looks at him and asks him this question: what were you arguing about on the road? Now, I got to tell you, just that one question cut to the core of each and every single one of their hearts. It exposed so much. One sentence, one question mark, exposed so much in the lives of these disciples about who they were, where they were, what their intentions were, what their heart really said about who they were. Let me tell you, God has the ability to do that in our lives. And I got to ask you where you're at. Has that ever happened to you? Have you ever had a question that exposed something deeper that is going on in your heart? One question that when it comes to your life, you, like the disciples, just want to be silent. You want to not answer it. Or maybe you want to run. Or maybe you just want to push on and keep being busy about life. Have you had that kind of question come into your life? Has God ever asked you a tough question? You know, all the time we have questions, difficult questions that come into our life. Maybe a question like, why are you so angry? I remember just God questioning different things, like, why are you so upset right now? Why are you so angry at this person? And what we find is that simple question sort of cuts below the core of where we're at, and then we begin to realize, wow, there's deeper things going on there than what is looking like is on the surface. Or maybe the question comes in, is it your pride or ego that is hurt? Maybe it's not the actions of someone, but how it affects your pride and sort of where you are in your life. Or God comes in, why didn't you call that person back? Why are you avoiding them? Why won't you just talk to them? Why won't you confront this issue that's going on in your life? Or maybe the simple question of, where have you been lately? You know, I've been here. I've been wanting to spend time with you. I need to talk to you about some stuff. Where have you been? Why have you been so busy? Why have you been too busy for me? Or maybe the question, why don't you listen when I call? When I'm calling on your heart, when I'm calling you into a relationship with me, why don't you listen? Why don't you respond? Or maybe the question, why are you doing this action? Or why are you doing that action? Or maybe some of us, why aren't you doing this? Or why aren't you doing that? What is really going on in your heart or your life? One of my favorite questions, or maybe the one I like to avoid the most in my life, is simply this: am I really first in your life? God coming in and saying, am I really before all things in your life? Am I really the most important person, most important thing? Am I the most important response, most important? Does that make sense? Where is he at in your priority level? That's where he wants to be. Now, some of us, the reason that we run, the reason that we hide is because we're ashamed. We're ashamed of what we did. We're ashamed of what we didn't do. We're ashamed of the places we've been. We're ashamed of all this thing. And so what we find is that when God begins to question our hearts and our lives, we, like the disciples, want to run away. We, like the disciples, want to be quiet. We want to not say anything. We forget the fact that God can simply say, I saw that, right? We think that we're hiding something from God. I got to let you know that God saw you, right? He knows what you did. He knows what you didn't do. Not only that, and here's what someone needs to hear here in this house right now. He knows why you do what you do. Because there's a reason behind it. He knows everything you've experienced, every pain, every ill thought action that has been done against you. He knows it, he understands it, and he wants to help you through it. But see, what we want to do is we want to run, or we want to hide, or we don't want to come against that thing face to face because we're ashamed of it. So God comes into our life, and the first thing we want to do is we want to run and hide. And he says, we can't run and hide. We need to talk about this. I need to spend time. We need to work on this area. I know it's going to hurt, but I'm not going to leave you in this all alone. I'm going through this with you. That makes sense? We want to run and we want to hide, but we can't. He already knows. Some of you guys came in through these doors today. You got heavy hearts. You got things you're struggling with, things that keep coming back to you and haunting you. And you're like, man, I really want to break free. He brought you here to let you know he wants that too. But you're going to have to take the mask off. You're going to have to open up. You're going to have to be real with him, and you're going to have to be real with others in your life. F. Scott Fitzgerald, in his book, The Great Gatsby, wrote this. He said, God knows what you've been doing, everything you've been doing. You may fool me, but you can't fool God. You may fool me, but you can't fool God. The minute that we realize that and live like that, I'm going to let you know an incredible freedom is going to come into your life, because you're going to realize and know I don't need to be ashamed. I don't need to run from God. I can be exactly where I am. Now, the promise of God, he's not going to leave you there, right? He's going to change. He's going to work in that area of your life, but you can come to him just as you are. But instead what we do is we just put on a mask, we avoid the question, and we just simply say, nothing's changed. We puff ourselves up with pride. We pat ourselves on the back. We give ourselves an attaboy. We look at others and say, man, am I glad I'm not him, right? Man, am I glad I'm not her. She's messed up. I'm doing great. Look at me in my life. That's our attitude that we have. We look at how far we've come, and we sit back with a satisfied air about ourselves. Man, at least I'm not that person. And it happens so often, especially in a Christian's life. Well, the disciples in the moment where Jesus says, what are you guys arguing about? They're silent. They're silent. Now, they may know that he knows what they were arguing about, because the next thing he's going to do, and he's going to call them together. He's going to sit down, and whenever Jesus sat down, he was ready to teach a principle. And you can imagine how excited when they realized he knew what we were arguing about. He's sitting down right now. He is going to teach us the key to greatness. He's going to teach us how to be the greatest. We want to be the greatest. He's going to teach us how to do it. And they're probably thinking to themselves, and I'm really good, and I'm better than these guys, so I'm definitely going to get this. Whatever he teaches me, I'm going to do it better than all of them, and I'm going to be the greatest one. Maybe they thought that. Could have saw myself thinking that if I was in the midst of that moment. Jesus is going to teach us how to be great. So they sit down, all excited to hear what their Lord and Master is about to teach them, how they are going to earn greatness in the kingdom of heaven. And then he teaches, and listen to what he says in the next verse. Mark 9, verse 35. Sitting down, Jesus called the 12 and said, anyone who wants to be first must be very last and the servant of all. You know, you read that, you can almost feel the air deflate from that room. They're like, oh man, this stinks, dude. Who wants this? A servant? Diakonos? No. Who wants to do that? I want to be served. I don't want to serve. Right? That's what being great's all about, right? I want to be served because of my greatness. I don't want to serve. I don't want to be a servant. And you can almost hear Jesus saying the words like, exactly, that's right. To be in my kingdom, it's upside down. To be in my kingdom, you have to stand on your head because things look different around here. So we see that we, as believers, are called to be servants and are called to be servants of all. We are called to be active. We are called to be giving back. We are called to do something with the light that God has entrusted us with. In the very next chapter, Mark chapter 10, we read about two brothers, James and John, sons of Zebedee. They're fighting and they're arguing now. Now, what they're arguing about is they want to sit on the right hand and the left hand of Jesus. They're like, come on, we're your road dogs. He's on one side, I'm on one side. We're going to keep this thing in the family, Jesus. You know what I mean? And they're making plans. Now, the other disciples hear them talking, and they're like, oh, there's a problem. They get angry with them. Well, who says you can sit on the right hand? I should be able to sit on the right. I've earned it. I've done more than you have. I deserve to be in that place. And so they get angry and upset. A fight stirs among them. And then we hear the voice of Jesus coming out in Mark chapter 10, verse 43, echoing something that was said in Mark chapter 9. Listen to the words of Jesus. He said, not so with you. Instead, whoever wants to become great among you must be your servant. That word is the word we're looking at. He says, if you want to be great, you must learn how to serve. He says, my kingdom is upside down. It doesn't make sense to you, but that's what my kingdom is all about. If you want to be great, then you need to be the greatest servant of all. And see, the thing is that culture and the world says that you are first and that you are great when people serve you. When people do things for you, when people put you on a pedestal, when you have the nicest things and the most notoriety and the biggest house and the best neighborhood with the most awesome car, and when everybody talks about you in a positive light around town and you have the most friends, then you have achieved greatness. That's what the world says. And the problem is we bring that worldly mentality into the church. And so we think to be great, that's what I need to have in my life. Jesus says, no. My kingdom is different than the world's kingdom. And he says that when you are serving your hardest, then you are great. When you are pouring it all out in service to others, gaining nothing but glory to me for what you're doing, by glorifying me through your actions on the earth, when you're doing that, in that moment, that's when you become great. Now, I need you to really think about that, and I need you to think about that in terms of your life, in terms of where you're at. Using Jesus as ruler for your life, how great is your life? Who are you serving? Where are you serving? What are you doing? And I'll ask you this question, where is your life going? So if we say to be great in the kingdom is to serve others, not wanting anything in return, but to pour your life out, to help and serve the needs of other people around you, where are you in that equation? For many of us, we would say, I have really great intentions, I'm just really not following through with that. Because a lot of times, many of us hear that we would say, you know what, I would do that, but, right? There's always an excuse. There's always a reason why. I would do this, but I've got kids, and I would do that, but I got to pay the bills, and I would do that, but I got to work overtime. I would do that, but I got all these other responsibilities and things in my life that I have to do. God, I really want to serve you, but there's something else for me to do in the midst of this moment. See, it seems like all of us have a but when it comes to what we're called to do. You know, and in all honesty, that really makes me think. Here, check this video.
I got a big butt. It's gigantic, if I'm going to be blunt about it. And you know what? The funny thing is, I got several big butts. And before you discard me or wince at the disgusting notion of that, I'm going to go out on a limb here and suggest that possibly you have at least one big butt as well. Yeah, you like that? Hurts a little, huh? Let me tell you something. Let me just tell you something, okay? Everybody we know has a big butt. And more often than not, it's the thing that actually gets in the way of us living a consistent life for Jesus. I think you know what I'm talking about. I'm going to expound a little bit, okay? See if you can recognize some of these butts. But I have to work more. But my favorite TV show is on. But my kids have practice. But I got to tweet something. But it's such a beautiful day. But I'm just not in the mood. But I deserve a break today. You see, everything kind of interferes with my life of just living an authentic life for God, okay? And more often than not, it always has something to do with some sort of but, okay? Even the littlest of but can distract me. It really can. The littlest but can make me think, I'm not going to pray today. I'm not going to think about it today. I'm not going to deny myself. I'm not going to read the Bible, blah, blah, blah. Whatever God asked me to do, I seem to have a but for it and get away, okay? And the most horrendously big but of all time is the but that gets in the way of me just hanging out with God and reading His Word. It's true. Think about it. All the times you're about to open that, and all of a sudden a big giant but gets in the way. A but, much like one of these. But I got a farm bill, but I'm tired, but the game's over, but I read last Tuesday, but I got to check Facebook, but I don't like Leviticus, but it's too hot in here, but I just don't like books, but I don't understand it, but it's boring. But what does that have to do with me in the 21st century? Those are some ugly butts, people. Let's just call them what they are, ugly. Ugly butts. Okay? And there's a lot more to them, sad but true. Here's a list, although not exhaustive, of some of the most popular buts known to mankind. But I don't have enough money yet. But others will think that I'm a nerd if I carry the Bible. But they won't like me if I talk about Jesus. But I don't know if God will do what I ask. But I just can't get motivated. But I'm afraid. But I don't have all the answers. But the small group is the same night as Monday Night Football. But can't I just let my life speak for itself? But I'm not happy. But that's not my gift. That's the pastor's job. But I don't know how to pray. But I can't believe that. But I don't know where to start. But everybody else is having fun. Buts abound, friend. But. Here a but, there a but, everywhere a but. Okay? And the most overused but of all time, but I just don't have enough time. Really? Oh, come on. We have a lot of buts. God has given us a real simple word. Okay? If we learn it and we share it and we teach it and we live by it, then see, God gets glorified, people benefit, and then we get blessed. That's why we do what we do. That's the why behind the but. Okay? And ultimately, that's the whole point I'm trying to make here, my fellow butt lovers, is if your but is bigger than your why, then your butt's too big. Okay, it's time to, metaphorically speaking, snap into a Slim Jim. Okay, let's slap on some spiritual shape-ups and hit the road a little bit so we can just manage the butts a little bit. That's all we're trying to do. That's what we're talking about. Let's minimize the excuses. Let's shrink the butts. Shrink the butts. Say it with me. Shrink the butts. That's what we need to do. And you and I can do that together. We can conquer this. You and I can do it if we start today, okay? I know we can. Let's just do it. No ifs, ands, or... Yeah. I think you get it.
You know, when I first saw that, I said, man, that's me. Every excuse in there, I understand. We're so busy in this culture and busy in this time. We have so many different excuses why not to do. So many buts of why we're not doing what God has called us to do. And today, I just really want to unpack 3 for you real quick as we close up today. 3 buts that I've faced in my life and maybe 3 buts that you've faced in your life. And really how to get over those or how to get past them. The first one that I've used consistently in my life is, but there's no need, right? But there's no need. I look around my life and I say, well, there's no real need. You know, the people, I don't see that need around me. It looks like everybody's doing fine. It looks like everything's going fine all around me, but there's no real need. The solution behind that, if you're here and you're like, that's how I feel, you know, there's no real need around me. I want you to pray for open doors. And I want you to begin to pray for open doors to serve. Pray for open doors to see what's taken place. You know, there's a story in the book of Mark, chapter 10, verse 51, where Jesus comes face to face with the blind man. And he's communicating to the blind man. And he looks at the person that's blind and he says this, what do you want me to do? Jesus asks, what do you want me to do? And the blind man looks to Jesus and says, Rabbi, I want to see. And in the midst of that portion of Scripture, Jesus heals him and he's able to see. But in all honesty, I wish that was a prayer that each and every single one of us would pray. Jesus, I want to see. Lord, I want to see. I want to see how you're setting me up to be used. I want to see the needs of the people around me. I want to see how you've taken my past and you're allowing my past to somehow speak to my present and help people that are in this situation where they need to hear my voice right now. God, I want to see. Does that make sense? You begin to pray that. God begins to open your eyes and you begin to see why you are living in the place where you are, why you are around the people that you are, why you're working in the job where you're currently working, why you're born into the family that you're born into, why you're in the situation where you find yourself in right now. Everything begins to make sense when we begin to pray, God, let me see. God, let my eyes be open. God, let things make sense to me. So if you're here and you look around your life and say, but there's no need around me, I want to challenge you this week to pray. Say, God, open my eyes. Let me see. And you may just find that the blinders will fall off and you'll begin to see the multitude of needs all around you and how God is setting you up to be the answer to prayer in the life of so many people. I challenge you, will you pray that prayer this week? The second but that I've dealt with a lot in my life is, but I don't know how. Maybe you're there. I see the need, but I don't know how to meet that need. I don't know how to do what needs to be done. If that's your but, if that's what you're struggling with right now, I want to challenge you in your life to do something new or to do something different. Do something new or do something different. Picasso is noted as saying this quote. He said, "I am always doing things I cannot do. That is how I get to do them." I'm always doing things that I don't know how to do. That's how I get to do them. What is the Lord calling you to do in your life that you're not doing because you say, I don't know how to do that? And the reality is He's calling you to that because you don't know how to do that, because He doesn't want you to get the glory. He's going to get the glory through you. When you begin to do things that you can't do, that only God can do through you, who gets the glory? He does. When you point back to Him and say, I could have never done this without God. God enabled me to do that. I look back at the story of even this church and taking that very first scary step where we gathered 12 people in our living room and started praying for God's will to be done. Never did I see everything that would happen. It reminds me of Martin Luther King's quote, who said, faith is taking the first step even when you don't see the whole staircase. Little did I know back then the lives that would be touched or the doors that would be opened or the things that would be done. And I think back, what if I let that fear stop us from taking that very first step? And I don't ever want you in your life to look back with regret. I want you to step out and I want you to do all that God has called you to do. I'm going to tell you, it's going to be scary every single time because He calls us to scary things. It's going to be beyond your capability level because He wants to be glorified in the midst of it. All He wants is your faith in Him and your willingness to take that first step. You don't need to know where it's going to go, but you have to walk in obedience to the very first step that He allows you to take. The question is, are you willing to take that step today? You've got to be willing. The last but I'm going to talk about today is this: but I don't have time. All of us, we're busy, got all this stuff going on, and we say, but I don't have time. My solution to you is very, very simple. It's simply this: schedule. Schedule. If it's in your schedule, it's going to get done. Schedule what? Schedule serving others. Make it a priority in your life. Make it something that you write down. Make it something that you have to go back to. You know, as I was preparing, I began to think about my life, and I'm really, really busy. I got a lot of things going on, a lot of different things all the time, taking up my time. In fact, if you looked at my life looks a little bit like this. Man. And you know what it is? It's just all like this little stuff. This is like little stuff that you guys do too, you know? Maybe little stuff tied in with the kids, tied in with keeping up the house, tied in with your work and all these different things going on. And before you know it, all of these things, they fill up your life. I look at my life, this is what my life looks like it's totally full. And you may be in that place too, totally full. And then you come to church, and Pastor Greg, now he's talking about serving others, right? Big rock, you know, you're like, I have a full life already. I got all this stuff going on. And now I'm supposed to take this big rock and I'm supposed to put it in my life and I'm supposed to start serving others. And he's talking about spending time with God and reading the Bible and praying and all this stuff. And what your life looks like is you leave here sort of energized. You're like, oh yeah, I'm going to do this. We're going to serve others. I'm excited. And then you get home and you put it in. And it looks a little like this. And you're like, man, I can't do this. I don't have time to do this. I got all this other stuff going. I'm trying to do this. I'm banging my head up against the wall. This isn't how my life is supposed to look. And so we look at our life like this. So what ends up happening eventually, and I know that it happens, is that we just finally reach a place, well, obviously this isn't working. I'm tired. I'm just going to go ahead. I'm just going to take that out. All right? I can't do it. I tried. It's unconducive with my life because I'm living a productive life with stuff that needs to be done, and I can't fit all this stuff in here, so I'm just going to continue doing what I've been doing. Right? But then we come to the gospel. See, the gospel says we give it all over to God. And so the gospel says what He wants us to do when we come to Jesus is that we take it all and we pour it all out before Him. It says when we come to Jesus, we come like this. You don't come to Jesus because you're so good, because you're so smart, because you come because you're broken. You come because you realize that he is the way, the hope, the life, the truth, everything that we need. And so you have to empty yourself out. You can't come full. You have to empty yourself out. Humbly come to God. So that's the place that we go. And so now when we come to God, we're emptied out. And we say, God, but this life, it's not about me anymore. It's not about all these little things that I got to do. It's not even my life. I give it all over to you. It's your life now. What do you want me to do with my life, Lord? What do you want me to do? And so we open his word and he starts communicating and telling us. And we see that there are things in our life that are important to God. And now, because we've emptied everything out before him, this life is completely and totally his. And so now we come and we say, all right, God, I want my life to be reflective of what's important to you. And so I'm going to take this, and this is going to be the first thing in my life. See, the first thing, God, I'm going to put in my life is something to glorify you, what you want in my life. He said, but God, I got to let you know, I got all this other stuff going on too. The kids aren't going away. The bills are still going to keep coming in. He's like, I got this. And then he says to you, all right, go ahead and take that stuff now and put it back into your life. And so you go ahead and you go and take all this stuff, all these different activities, these different things, different responsibilities, the different organizations that you're over, your company and your kids and meetings with the teachers and all these different things, spouse time, quiet time, birthday parties, all that stuff. You put it in. The same amount is in it both times. See, that's the beauty of serving Christ. When we have our priorities in order, it all works together. Because all these same things that needed to be done before, when we took what God had called us to, we couldn't fit it all in. But when we put him in first, when we made God first priority in our life, we find out we were able to fit everything in that we needed to get accomplished. See, the question is, are you able to get it all done? The question is, what's your first priority? When God becomes our first love, our first priority, the first thing in our life, we find all these other things are going to get done. There's a great Christian throughout history, and he made this quote. He said this. He says, you know what? My life is too busy not to pray. See, some of us in our life, we make a statement, I'm too busy to pray. He had the opposite mentality. He said, I'm too busy not to pray. And when my schedule doubles, my prayer time doubles because I need God that much. And what he was able to do is he was able to get all these little things done by never sacrificing, glorifying God in his life. My challenge for you this week is, are you willing to take your life? Are you willing to empty it out? Are you willing to put it all out and stand before God empty and say, God, my life is not my own, it's all yours. I want your priorities to be my priorities, and I'm going to live to glorify you. If you're willing to do that, it's going to be an awesome ride. Let's pray. God, I pray, Lord, right now, I want to be that man. I know there's people in here, they want to be that person. They want a life that glorifies you. They want to put you first in everything. They're busy. Yeah, they got stuff going on, but Lord, they know that without you, they can accomplish nothing. And so we come before you today at that place. We come before you just humbly surrendering all the rice and all the stuff and all the life that we have. We empty it out before you, Lord. And we stand before you and say, Lord, teach us what's the most important. Teach us to put what's most important in our lives first. And we know what's most important starts by putting you first, Lord. And maybe you're here today and that's something that's not in your life. You're the person that is filled with rice and you're trying to put a rock in there and it's not working. Today's your day to empty yourself out. Today's your day where you come to God and say, God, I'm tired of trying to do this on my own. I can't do it on my own anymore. I desperately need you to move in my life. I want to give over full control. I want to empty myself out before you. I want to rebuild my life from the ground up. And Jesus, you're going to be the foundation. I want to build on you. Maybe you're here today and that's a step that you want to take. I want to offer you that opportunity. I'm going to say a prayer with you in a minute, and you don't need to come to the front. I just want you to acknowledge that before God right now. If you're here and say, Jesus, I want you to take the wheel. Jesus, I want you to take my life. Jesus, it's all about you now. I want you to lift up your hand because I'm going to say a prayer with you in just a minute. Go ahead and say, that's what I want. I see you. Who else says, that's what I want in my life? I want to put Jesus first today and every day. I see you, brother. I see you. I see you. Is there anyone else? That's what I want in my life. If you're here today, maybe your life's been full of other stuff, but today's the day to realign. You love Jesus already, but you know you got to empty that thing. I want you to consider that this week. We're going to say a prayer. I want you all to say this prayer with me together. Those that are praying this prayer for the very first time, getting their lives in order. Those that have said this prayer before, I want you to join those that are praying for the very first time. Repeat after me. Say, Jesus, I empty myself out before you. Help me put you first. I'm sorry for what I've done in the past. Today and every day, I want to live a life that glorifies you. Thank you for what you did on a cross at Calvary. And thank you for forgiving me of all my sins. Help me live for you today and every day.